Hello and welcome to another episode of Episodic Chance. I'm your host Chance, and today I'll be flexing my knowledge of superhero comics with a look at one of Marvel's animated series. However, the show we're looking at isn't a popular one for quite a few reasons. Avengers Assemble has a mixed reception, to put it lightly. I remember this show leaving a sour taste in people's mouths back in the day, mostly because it replaced the previous show that came before it, Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, as per Disney's mandate to have a show that tied in with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which got massively popular after the success of the first Avengers movie. Having seen a few episodes of the show myself, it's just okay, but when compared to Earth's Mightiest Heroes, it does feel like it's lacking in a few areas. What's sad is that this series did introduce several ideas that could work, but it seems like the showrunners were only going for the bare minimum. Such is the case with the episode we'll be looking at today. Although I specifically chose this for reasons that will become apparent later. Before I explain that, let's first talk about the title for this episode, Dark Avengers. Those of you who actually read comic books, or know about comic book lore through people like Comic Drake or Linkara, might know of an actual team called the Dark Avengers. To make a long and convoluted story short, one that involves both a superhero civil war and a secret invasion of alien shapeshifters, the Avengers as a team were disbanded and in hiding for a while as Norman Osborn, aka Spider-Man villain the Green Goblin, manipulated the media into promoting himself as America's greatest hero to further his agenda. Part of his plan involved setting up his own team of Avengers. Said team was made up of villains impersonating famous heroes and actual heroes with questionable morals. Osborn even went so far as to create his own superhero persona called the Iron Patriot. The real Avengers would make a comeback and defeat their dark counterparts, but that didn't stop the Dark Avengers from coming back a few times. This episode has nothing to do with those Dark Avengers. I think the name was chosen simply because it sounded cool and fits with what we're about to see. This may not have the actual Dark Avengers, but it does feature another team of morally gray superheroes.
Well, what do we have here?
My hero!
Who?
Right now, you're probably wondering, who are these people and why do they look like Justice League ripoffs? Well, that's because they technically are Justice League ripoffs. But there's a bit more to it than that. This next bit is going to be a lot for some people, so I put a time code on the video for those who want to skip to the actual review. Otherwise, please allow me to explain. Since as far back as the 1960s, both Marvel and DC Comics have been doing unofficial crossovers of sorts. I say unofficial because these weren't really crossovers in the regular sense. Because of things like copyright and wanting to avoid legal issues, the companies would create analogs, pastiches, or parodies of characters from each other and have them either fight or team up with their in-house characters. Concepts like these are still popular today, and not just with Marvel or DC, and even outside of comic books we have examples like Invincible and The Boys, which have their own analogs and parodies of various superheroes, usually from Marvel or DC. And that brings us back to Marvel and their version of DC's Justice League, Squadron Supreme. First appearing in Avengers number 85 in 1971, the Squadron have often interacted with the Avengers on many occasions, but usually the writers have them fighting each other more often than not. Technically, some of their members have made earlier appearances as the villainous team Squadron Sinister, but that group was later retconned into being copies of their Supreme counterparts created by the Grandmaster, aka Jeff Goldblum's character from Thor Ragnarok. With that said, there are quite a few different versions of Squadron Supreme and Squadron Sinister running around both the main Marvel universe and the wider multiverse, so it can be a bit confusing for those who don't know the deeper lore of Marvel Comics. One thing that has stuck with the Squadron in modern interpretations is their willingness to take morally dubious actions in order to achieve peace, which sometimes borders on authoritarianism. This can be attributed to their critically acclaimed 12-issue limited series from 1985, written by Mark Grunwald. Having read the series myself, I highly recommend it. Some argue that this series is Marvel's answer to DC's Watchmen, which I kind of agree with, but I also see elements in this story that would influence both contemporary and future comics from DC. I argue that, in many respects, Squadron Supreme is the spiritual precursor to DC's Injustice: Gods Among Us, because the basic premise for both stories focus around establishing world peace by going to great extremes with horrific consequences. Also, I think this guy might be Marvel's version of Shoto Todoroki from My Hero Academia. So with that all established, where does the show's version of the Squadron compare with the others? Well, the gist is that the show's Squadron are actually human-like aliens from another planet. They screwed up protecting their planet, and may have blown it up, and they want a do-over on Earth. However, the Avengers oppose the Squadron's more authoritarian methods of justice. To add further parallels with the Justice League, each member of the Squadron is voiced by an actor who's played a similar character from a DC animated series or film. The most obvious out of them is Dr. Spectrum, as his voice actor, Phil Lamar, played Green Lantern in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited.
Once I finish this device, it will cement my control of reality.
Another obvious one is Nighthawk's voice actor, Anthony Ravivar, who played the titular character in Beware the Batman.
We should be feared, ruling this world, not smiling for the camera.
Speed Demon's voice actor, Jason Spisak, also played Kid Flash in Young Justice.
Hey, Dr. Spectrum, I got your true power right here!
Hyperion's voice actor, Brian Bloom, hasn't played Superman, but he did play his evil universe counterpart, Ultraman, in Justice League Crisis on Two Earths.
All in a day's work for the Squadron Supreme.
Ironically, Bloom also played Captain America in Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Unfortunately, Zarda's voice actor, April Stewart, hasn't played Wonder Woman or any character associated with Wonder Woman. The only DC characters of relevance she's played, according to IMDb, are Stompa and Granny Goodness from DC's Superhero Girls.
All right, Hawkeye, hands in the air!
That same IMDb page also says she's played a bunch of South Park characters and is the voice for both Rava and Firelord Izumi from The Legend of Korra. For some reason, we see here that Squadron Supreme are the Earth's mightiest heroes instead of the Avengers. After Hyperion unintentionally activates a force field that traps the Squadron inside it, we see that the villain responsible for this attack is Iron Man in his Model 42 armor? You might be thinking that this is a mirror universe situation where the good guys are bad and the bad guys are good, but that's not the whole truth. The Squadron breaks free and proceeds to kick Iron Man's iron ass. Things get a bit trippy when Iron Man shoots Dr. Spectrum's gemstone, which warps reality to where Iron Man sees himself in his red armor alongside the other Avengers. The evil Iron Man retreats, and Dr. Spectrum regains control over his gemstone, assuring his team that Iron Man wouldn't understand what he saw. The truth is that the Squadron flipped reality to where they're the Earth's greatest heroes and the Avengers don't exist. Granted, the people who were the Avengers still exist, but now they're evil versions of themselves. This was accomplished by Dr. Spectrum, who got his hands on the Reality Stone, one of the infamous Infinity Stones, but as shown in the previous scene, he has trouble controlling it. Unsatisfied with the current reality they've created, Nighthawk pressures Spectrum into completing a machine that can harness the Reality Stone's full power, thus allowing the Squadron to erase the Avengers from existence entirely. I can't confirm this, but I get the strange feeling that one of the writers at Marvel Comics took inspiration from this episode for one of the company's event comics. Fortunately, this episode doesn't involve Agent Coulson being a villain. At his secret hideout, Tony Stark tries to piece together the vision he saw earlier. Looking up files on the people in said vision leads into J. Jonah Jameson providing exposition about these so-called outlaws.
The real outlaw is whoever told Jameson to grow that mustache.
At least it's an improvement over what he has in the comics. Seriously, Jonah, what made you think having that mustache was a good idea? By now I should mention the other evil versions of the Avengers, which are a bit underwhelming. I mean, yeah, they're criminals and thieves, but given how the showrunners have access to decades worth of Marvel comics, it feels like there's a lot of wasted potential here. For example, evil Iron Man is just regular Iron Man in his Model 42 armor. Perhaps as a nod to the Dark Avengers team, why not have him wear the Iron Patriot armor and be some jingoistic arms dealer? Or as a better example, have him be Superior Iron Man. While I know it takes months in advance for animated shows nowadays to produce an episode, the first couple issues of Superior Iron Man were on comic store shelves around the time this episode aired, so there could have been some room here for overlap. Another example is Captain America, although his evil appearance works better in context. His evil persona is only referred to as the Captain, and Steve Rogers used both this identity and costume during a popular storyline from his comics in the 1980s. Also written by Mark Gruenwald, by the way. This costume would later be used by another character named John Walker, who was Rogers' replacement as Captain America during that storyline, who would become US Agent. As US Agent, Walker was also a member of the Dark Avengers team, so at least Cap's appearance here ties into that. As for the other evil Avenger designs, they're not very interesting or noteworthy. Although I will mention that Evil Hulk looks like Grey Hulk with a short mohawk, and Evil Hawkeye looks like he was trying to cosplay as Red Hood but couldn't find the matching jacket or helmet. He could pass for Roy Harper if he was wearing a trucker hat though. Bringing all of the evil Avengers together, Stark suggests they all team up and steal the Reality Stone. Granted, he's still under the impression that they've always been villains and thinks the squadron prevented them from teaming up in the past.
You want us to attack the squadron because you have a warm and fuzzy feeling we were once teammates? Sorry, I'm out.
I work alone.
Side note, Hawkeye and Black Widow in the show are voiced by Troy Baker and Laura Bailey respectively. They've done a lot of voice work, but I personally know them as the voices of Reese and Fiona from Tales from the Borderlands. The others aren't convinced, but then the Captain appears, revealing that he went into hiding because he felt like he was forced into being something he wasn't. He tells Stark to replay the vision from earlier, which reveals their former heroic identities.
Go Avengers!
Wait, you think we're the good guys? And we're called the Avengers?
To be fair, Black Widow and Hawkeye were originally antagonists in their first comic book appearances, so I understand the doubt there. Also, you could make the argument that Hulk is sometimes portrayed as an antagonist depending on his role in the story. Upset that Hyperion failed to capture Stark, Nighthawk decides to take matters into his own hands by trying to kill the Avengers himself. He's already proven himself to be the squadron's Batman by bumping shoulders with Hyperion. He should be thankful that Hyperion doesn't splatter him all over the place like Omni-Man. Nighthawk's, Hawk plane gets shot down and he plants a bomb on the Avengers Quinjet. The captain's concerned that the bomb will threaten half of the city, but the others don't really get why that's their problem.
We're all on the most wanted list, but have any of us actually taken a life? I'm guessing we're not very good at being bad guys.
I bet some writers at Marvel would beg to differ, Tony. Iron Man sacrifices himself to protect the city, much to the shock of the others. Motivated by his sacrifice, the Avengers rally to take down the squadron.
Avengers, assemble!
That does kind of sound familiar.
The Avengers attack the squadron in broad daylight, distracting them with Hulk and Thor while the rest sneak into their base. Hyperion and Nighthawk realize this and try to protect Dr. Spectrum while he's booting up his machine. The Captain knocks the Reality Stone out of Spectrum's palm, causing reality to warp again. The Captain almost falls to his death, but then Iron Man, now back in his good guy red armor, saves him. Seriously, did anyone think Iron Man was really dead? Anyone? Unfortunately, the Avengers might be too late as Spectrum's machine is now fully operational. With the Reality Stone in his hand, the Avengers are helpless as they watch themselves slowly fade from existence. That is until Iron Man shoots Spectrum and everyone makes a mad dash for the Reality Stone. The Captain grabs the Reality Stone, but before he can enter the machine, Hawkeye suggests that they use it to do whatever they want. The Captain disagrees, telling him that they're not dictators, but Avengers, and thus reality is restored and the Avengers are the Earth's mightiest heroes again. Being the sore losers they are, the squadron detonates explosives around Avengers Tower. While the squadron escapes, the Avengers keep the tower from causing further damage to the city, saving lives in the process.
You're amazing!
Thank you. All in a day's...
I was talking to Hulk.
She's talking to me.
The episode ends with the Avengers now in possession of the Reality Stone and talking about how they always have each other's backs no matter what reality they're in. Although I'm still wondering how the squadron got their hands on the Reality Stone to begin with. And that was Dark Avengers, and it was okay, but it could have been better. Like I mentioned earlier, Avengers Assemble offers several interesting ideas but seems to only go for the bare minimum. Or in some cases, it's forced into tying in with whatever MCU movie was out at the time. Dark Avengers is just one example of this. A premise where the heroes swap roles with their enemies is ripe for storytelling possibilities, but kind of falls short because the story is condensed into a single 21-minute episode. The Avengers turning into evil versions of themselves feels more cosmetic than it should be, which even the episode points out. Sure, the Avengers are supposed to be the real good guys here, but it would be a lot of fun to explore their dark sides in this situation. As for the squadron, it's obvious that they're not very heroic, go figure, but we also get to see the power dynamic within this group as Nighthawk is the real mastermind behind everything, and everyone else in the squadron is either his lackey or pawn rather than his equal. This is far from their last appearance, however, and from here on they become recurring antagonists for the rest of Season 2, each member of the squadron getting fleshed out in their own spotlight episodes. We'll tackle those episodes at some point, but for now we'll leave it here. My name's Chance, and thank you for watching.
In your paradise, a sanctuary burns while you play God. As above, so below, so below.
Well done, Zarna, but behold true power!